Hello, everybody, and welcome to this month's Specify and Practice Group call. We have a pretty full schedule today, and we have a large attendance, so I expect lots of conversation and questions. So I want to hand it over to Dave and Lewis to get started with today's session. So David and Lewis, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dave Stutzman coming to you from southern New Jersey. Nice, bright, sunny day here. It's a little on the humid side, though, and what a big change from having been in Phoenix, though, when we were tolerating 110-degree temperature out there only a week or so ago. So, Lewis, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing very well. It's rainy today in Nashville, but we have needed some rain, so it's welcome. I might explain to the folks that originally we had intended to do a session on sealants, and we were trying to arrange a guest speaker who works for one of the major sealant manufacturers, and things were not, we just couldn't get it together. And so David was kind enough to had this presentation that he had done some weeks ago or some months ago already, and it has the added benefit of having AIA learning units. So we will be explaining to you later how to get the certification for that if you're so interested.
Okay, so yeah, Lewis, this is a presentation I had done, slightly modified, I believe, but it was initially for FCA International, that's Floor Covering Finishing Contractors Association, and they had invited me to their annual meeting and to talk really to two groups, the flooring contractors and the architectural aluminum and glass contractors. So this was the presentation to the architectural glass and aluminum contractors, but I think it has an equally good meaning to virtually any specifier and product representative product manufacturer, because many of the concepts are the same regardless of the industry. So what I wanted to do is walk through just the basic requirements of what the AIA documents actually say should be done through the design process, through each of the design phases as we're all familiar with them. So let's look, because this is going to drive what we as specifiers are actually trying to do, and what the manufacturers and contractors may be able to actually contribute to the process. So during schematic design, we're going to evaluate the owner's program. And really, did you know that the owner is actually supposed to provide a program? Lewis, how many times do you get that?
Oh, from time to time, and sometimes we actually produce them ourselves. We will analyze what the owner's needs are and prepare a program for their approval.
And the one that I really like in this, the delivery method, the project delivery method, imagine that. It should be one of the very first decisions in this whole process. And yet we're oftentimes, as we're approaching finishing CDs, still trying to figure out whether it's going to be whether it'll be bid or negotiated, or whether it even will be a CM versus a contractor.
Most of our projects, I have to say, we know going into DDs what the project delivery method is going to be. It's not uncommon for many of our projects for the contractor to be on board before the owner hires us for the design.
Okay, and one of the other things we're supposed to be doing is discussing alternatives during schematic design. Let's get the things out on the table as to what we should be considering for the project and what sorts of different things that we should be looking at to, in some cases, determine price or performance or anything else that may affect the project.
Yeah, the basic concept, I think, of SDs is to come up with a basic schema or idea, organized idea, that is constructible, to test to see if it is in budget, and to test to see if the owner likes the layout, likes what the massing looks like, likes the basic design concept, and to get the owner's formal approval to proceed to the next level of detail.
Right. And so as a result of schematic design, these are the things we're supposed to be delivering. Drawings, description of systems, and major materials that are going to be included in the project. So many of the overall, call it the metadata decisions, should be made in schematic design and agreed upon.
Larry Whitlock asked, when should an architect provide the client with AIA document G612, owner's instruction to the architect regarding the construction contract? And my advice is as early as possible. And usually I have never been successful in just sending that to an owner and getting a good response. Usually you have to sit down and have a face meeting and go through it together and discuss that. But David and I, both over the years, we think it's very odd that it's so hard to get information from owners about the general conditions of the contract. I like to start in schematic design because it takes weeks or even months to be able to get that information, even though you don't need it that right away necessarily. It just takes so long to get it that as a practical matter, start it as early as possible.
Right. I would suggest as soon as you know what the delivery method is, you could send it to the owner and you could start having those discussions. I would love to see that document completed early in a project because it would be a great help. But what happens at the end of schematic design? We're supposed to have an estimate. So
and
we ought
David,
to. How does that?
How does RS Means organize their schematic design level cost data?
You're stealing the thunder here.
No, I'm being your shill.
Oh, okay. So we need to be considering RS Means preliminary data is organized by uniformat. We're going to get to that, a comment on it in a little bit. But the whole point is we're supposed to be having an estimate. This is actually required under AIA documents to confirm that the project is within the owner's budget. Two different things: architect's estimate, contractor's pricing, owner budget. Owner always is responsible for the budget. So we move on to DD. Okay, so what sorts of things are we going to do in DD? We're going to fix everything, right? Fix all of the systems. Decide what it is that we're actually going to complete the construction documents to develop the design intent. Right?
I see design development as being the verification of the constructability of the approved SD design, and for coordinating product decisions with interdisciplinary constraints. You know, how does the roof design affect the structural design for the roof?
Excellent. Yeah, I agree with you. And during design development, we're also selecting all the materials, the system, and identifying the project quality. Because if we don't, we can't deliver the required items at the end of design development. We're required to deliver drawings and outline specs by AIA documents. So I will tell you from my own experience, outline specs are not used all that often. And during design development, depending upon what the delivery method is, we may very well be finding ourselves producing the first draft construction specs. And that's often the case if the delivery method is a CM where they're looking to get a GMP. And here, because we're looking at these outline specs, Louis, what I want to do is back up and say, we ought to be considering something like this: preliminary project description, This is what I'm trying to propose to most of our clients as the substitute for outline specs. And you mentioned uniformat, and that's why, because the early estimates are often developed on uniformat-based estimating.
The other thing about using a uniformat is that now in your diagram you've showed very clearly as beads on a string, but what we want to try to do is create an information stream that is a continuous stream, so that it starts out as a trickle in northern Minnesota and becomes the mighty Mississippi as it dumps into the Gulf. And one of the ways that we can do that is in the preliminary project description. In schematic design, we can describe the curtain wall system in very generic terms. We might have performance requirements for the U value and for the solar heat gain coefficient of the glass. But we don't need to pick a specific model as a basis of design. We don't have to narrow in on the color of the glass and so forth. We can wait till we get to design development to do that for truly accurate pricing. But we can still make meaningful descriptions. And by thinking of the PPD not as just a deliverable for the owner's approval and cost estimating purposes, but as a live document that we can, as we're going through design development from the first early days of this DD phase, we can start adding whenever a product decision is made to document that in the file that should be readily available if you're using Newforma or one of the other project management software that would be readily available to everyone on the project team.
Right, and I would suggest PPD data could actually be developed even before design starts. It could come out of the owner's program.
Exactly. When you get the owners, many large corporate owners and institutional clients have statements of their preferred products, whether it's roofing or they may have national agreements, purchasing agreements for certain products, and there's no reason why we couldn't start documenting those early and up front. And besides, if the client says, I don't care what it looks like, but I want red brick, we can go ahead and start doing that. Would you go back just one step, please?
Sure.
We have a question from Ginger Adams. I'm sorry. The webinar description included a reference to value engineering. Does the project program include value engineering as part of the design, and if so, at what stage?
We're going to come to that too.
Okay.
Ginger, I think we'll show how this progresses, at least in many of the cases. But personally, I can say that we see value engineering occurring at various stages in the process. And we're actually in the middle of trying to finish a project now at what I would think is 90% CDs, and we're stuck in value engineering because we're over budget.
Which is not where you want to do it. But we will, Ginger, talk about that more positively in a minute. Gerald Jackson asks, if the project is design build, are these phases still the same? And generally they are, although occasionally with design build, the distinction between SD and DD may get a little bit blurry, and they may kind of be combined into kind of one long extended preliminary phase.
Right. Yeah, and I would agree that it's generally the same process. It just may be overlapping when you start looking at it as a design build. So construction documents. What are we supposed to be doing? We're actually supposed to be setting the detail, right? Notice it says construction documents. We're setting detail. We're not designing at this point. right? We're going to deliver drawings and specs, final construction documents at the end of construction or at the end of CD phase, right? Bidding, once we get into bidding...
Well, let's go back one. I'm sorry.
Oh, you want to talk about it. Go ahead.
Well, just to remind ourselves that in the two preceding phases, those are not contract documents as such. Here, in construction documents, is where we're going to put in the thou shalt requirements that are legally enforceable requirements to get the owner the kind of construction, the level of quality that it desires.
You're not allowed to say thou shalt. Where is that imperative mood, Lewis? Where is that streamlined spec? Okay, so bidding phase, what we're really doing is we're responding to the bidders and their questions. We're trying to help them to understand the documents and make sure that they have all the correct data to submit the most accurate bid that they can. And the one distinction here that we often see the industry using is request for information, RFI, where when you look at even the AIA documents and the CSI sort of doctrine through their practice guides, really should be request for interpretation, because that's really what the design team is responsible to do, is to interpret the documents. Presumably the documents are complete enough for bidding, so it really should not be additional information.
And of course, once the documents are out for bidding, that's really kind of a test. And addenda, the size of an addenda is indicative of the quality of the documents. And we all know that the tighter the documents, the better the price we're going to get. The smaller the range of bids will be if it's very clear exactly what is wanted, and the contractor doesn't have to put in a fudge factor.
Well, and the greater the scope of an addenda, or the greater the number of addenda, decreases the confidence in the documents as well, and that can drive up that fudge factor.
Definitely.
Go ahead.
Let's say Mike Chapp says, we've had success setting the level of quality at documents or SD phase. My observation is that firms that specialize in project types can very easily envision the overall scope of work and the likely systems. A great methodology for flushing out costs early. Edward George makes the comment, perhaps mention that subs should not be contacting the design team directly. We're not going into, today's presentation is not going to cover directly bidding procedures and so forth, and we might want to do that in a future date if there's some interest in that, where we can go into that in a little more detail, Edward.
Right. So, and during construction, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. Really, the design team is there just to administer the contract and make sure that what is being delivered is actually meeting the contract requirements. Okay? So, jumping back to the beginning, and we looked at preliminary project description, but there are a couple of other things that happen along the way that we haven't really talked about yet. Actually, the architect's responsible for two more estimates, one at the end of D-Day, one at the end of C-Day. And it's really for the purpose of confirming that the design is still on track for meeting the owner's budget. Now, Lewis, how many, because you're in-house, are you producing estimates at the end of each design phase?
We don't do that many bid projects. Almost all of our projects, the CM or the general contractor is on board from the beginning of schematics, and they do the estimating. So it's only rarely, and we normally hire a consultant to do that because that's a whole expertise to itself that we don't have in-house as such.
Okay. So here's one distinction that I want to make, and CSI makes this distinction in the practice guides. The red line, design stops here. Right, Lewis?
Yeah, this is something that I've felt strongly about for the last 30 years, and have been the ear of anybody in the various firms I've worked for that would listen to me, is that in my thinking there should be enough information in design development documents that the project could be hard bid or a very good GMP could be assembled. There's not enough information to build it, but there should be enough information to price it very, very accurately, and to avoid the CD becoming the continuance of design.
Right, because when we delay the design and carry it over into CD, it really becomes, the farther that the design gets carried into CD, the more difficult it is to get everything coordinated and to deliver a very accurate set of documents.
The other thing is it can be extremely expensive in terms of one's internal costs. One of the things that the AIA definitions of these three phases are really pretty vague. And they do that, and that's not without a good reason, because the AIA documents have to cover everything from a one-person office who does small convenience stores and houses up to large multi-office firms that do mega projects like my own firm. But it would be advisable for folks in firms to sit down and think about, well, what does schematic design really mean? What does done look like at the end of SDs? And to create a document to record that, not in terms of the deliverables, those are pretty obvious, but in terms of what is the content of those deliverables. And the way to think about that is what decisions should be made in each phase. Because the concept is that if there's a decision that you can make in SDs and you let it slide to DDs, there's a multiplier, and it will cost you much more time and effort to solve that problem in DDs. Same thing if it's a decision on DDs and on detailing for how the window fits in the wall, or how to do a special curtain wall arrangement, and you put that off until CDs. I had a classic case some years ago where the designer had an interesting curtain wall situation with some leaning walls, and it was at an angle to the orthogonal grid, and it was going to be a really nifty glass box at the entrance to a performance venue on the third floor of a building. But the problem was the project architect put off talking to an aluminum guy until about a third or halfway through CDs, and the result was that it was not a problem to make there wasn't a issue with the basic concept, but to make it work, we had to get the structural team to move some of their beams and columns. The HVAC was affected by the location of the fin tube radiators at the base of the curtain wall. The electrical team had to move lighting, and so there was an immense amount of redrawing for something that could have been solved the first week or two of design development.
Right. Okay.
And so as I say, this is something that you might want to take home with you, is sit down with your various project teams in your offices and actually think about, what decisions do I need to make in each one of these phases, so that you have a checklist that to make sure that you are completing these at the end and getting enough information on the drawings so that design stops here. And in the IPD world, that's actually a contractual obligation. If you read the AIA documents for integrated project delivery, that is a basic requirement that all the major design decisions have to be made at the end of, I forget what they call that phase. The middle phase.
The middle phase. Okay, I like that. Is that a technical term? I like that, Louis. Okay, so what I wanted to point out is all of these items that I've identified here with a star, I believe these are all opportunities. Opportunities for both manufacturers, product reps, contractors, subcontractors to help the design teams. That they can offer insight into alternatives in the schematic design and some basic pricing information to be able to make some real value decisions. They can help with the materials and the systems in design development, help to select those that are most appropriate, those that are available, those that are going to fit the owner's budget. And in the construction documents, they can help to look at the construction details to make sure that they're actually buildable, make sure that it's going to work, and again, give better pricing information to help support the architect's estimate. So
well, the worst, it wasn't one of my projects, but there was a case a few years ago in Memphis where they had a major addition to the convention center that included a construction of a new performing arts center as well as an extension of the exhibit hall and meeting room spaces and so forth. And the problem was that the design was so complex that the local architect of record was somewhat overwhelmed. And the documents, my firm was hired to do a peer review of the documents, and they were far from complete. We wrote a lengthy report. Well, the bottom line was when it was bid, the bids came in at $57 million, and when the dust settled, after all the change orders, the total cost was something on the order of $95 million. So it really does behoove us to think and plan these decisions so that we can produce the documents in a timely fashion at a level of completion that will avoid such debacles.
Right. And one of the things that I'm actually suggesting to our clients as an independent specifier is many times specifiers are brought in towards the end of design development, sometimes not into construction documents, but we can contribute a good deal of information to those alternative discussions and the systems and material selections because of the kind of experiences that we have often on many more projects than some of the architects as our clients would get, and with a broader range so that we can offer alternatives that they may not be familiar with.
Larry Whitlock makes the comment that he encourages the architects in his office to use the AIA document D200 project checklist, but it does need updating. The problem with that checklist is that it is extremely detailed.
Immense, yes.
And almost to the point of micromanagement, and people just don't like to use it. It's very difficult to get people to use it. What I'm envisioning, Larry, is more of a list of kind of the strategic level conceptual kinds of things. It's hard to describe, but if you'll send me an email, I'll send you an example of what I'm talking about.
Okay, one other aspect that I would like to just touch on is that we are beginning to see a lot of design assist, and this is another opportunity certainly for contractors, subs, and manufacturers, product reps to get involved, because the architect is actually positively asking for help to be able to develop the design and to be able to develop the construction details, usually by the end of DD, such that Design Assist is actually producing what would become the shop drawing or the contractor's final submittal.
And in many cases, the number of details that the architect then has to prepare in CD phase can be somewhat reduced, because you've basically worked things out and there are no and there's some level of assurance that there are no misunderstandings between what the design intent is and what the subcontractor is actually going to provide.
Okay, so big red X, aligning with the red line for design stops here. This is usually where we're seeing GMP. Okay, and this is usually the telltale point in the project. You know, did the GMP actually hit the owner's budget, or are we over? And more, we're actually seeing the GMPs coming in greater than the owner's budget. And this is usually, at least on our projects, the first place where we see VE. And VE could happen from this point and any point forward. But the biggest difficulty here is if we're not engaging the entire design team, including input from manufacturers, product reps, contractors, and subs, we are constantly faced with going back and doing redesign. And for most of the architects, most of our clients, I know they are on the hook for this redesign at no additional cost, because they're required by contract to meet the owner's budget.
David, you might remind folks that when you say your clients, you mean as a spec consultant, your clients are the architects and engineers.
Generally, yes. So, and Lewis,
yes.
most of yours are probably in the same boat, right? Redesign at no cost?
Unfortunately.
Right. So if we can avoid it, everybody's going to win. Because who wants to do things twice?
Absolutely, and even just not only is there are cost savings, but there's an emotional cost to having to redesign, redraw, and there's also the issue of are our documents realistic in such a way that they are user friendly to the contractor, and or so there's that kind of the emotional relationship that can be aided by having good documents that puts the contractor less in an adversarial. Unfortunately, many contractors, their favorite phrase is dumb architect. So the more we can do to provide good, tight, practical documentation, the better off everybody is.
Okay, so I'd like to pick up on a comment here from Ginger Adams, since she asked about VE earlier. She says VE would be far more effective at the end of SD, schematic design phase, when making changes is not as involved as at the end of DD. And Ginger, I would agree 100%, and that's why I'm suggesting that there's an opportunity for the contractors, manufacturers, product reps to be involved, and yet many times we're seeing the design progress to a point where the only way that those folks that could potentially help get involved is on a specific request from an architect, because they don't necessarily have all the knowledge to make a decision and one decision.
Well,
the architects.
I'll give you
Go ahead,
specific
Lewis.
example. We're right now working on a high-rise building for downtown Nashville, and actually when it's complete, we're going to move into it. And we're nearing the end of SDs, and we're already beginning to talk with the contractor's preferred curtain wall subcontractor. And so we're going to be making some of those decisions up front as we go into DDs on the fly, so that we don't have to back up and rethink our decisions at a later date.
Right. And I had just a recent experience where I actually had an opportunity to talk to the contractor directly with the architect on the teleconference with us. And the contractor is already selected. It's going to be a negotiated contract. I asked the contractor, what are your preferred materials? Who are your preferred suppliers? Silence. He could not tell me. I said, I'm trying to be able to help in writing the specifications the first time to get to the folks that you would normally be using, and if you can tell me, it would be a great help. I never did get a response. So I don't know if I flabbergasted him because somebody actually asked an opinion, perhaps, but I don't often get that opportunity to even ask the contractor directly. And if any of you in our audience today are contractors, subs, material suppliers, I would encourage you to jump at that opportunity and try to help. So
Larry,
go ahead.
Yeah, Larry Whitlock points out that having to redesign and redraw can negatively impact schedules for following projects. That it costs everybody time and money, and we need to make good decisions at the right time and then stick with them.
Right.
And so one of the ways to do that is that when a decision is made on a product like curtain wall or the glass that goes in the curtain wall, let's go ahead and document that and record it, and maybe even prepare the specifications in parallel with the project decisions.
And the great place to record those decisions, PPD.
That's out on the network where everybody can access it and look at it to use as a basis for their design, so that the mechanical guys, instead of having to make some wild guess as to what the architect's exterior wall assemblies are going to be like, and look at them and say, oh, okay, that's the U value I have to work with. That's the solar heat gain coefficient for the glass. I can size my equipment on a rational basis.
Right. So one of the points I want to make with the text on the screen right now is the way that the documents develop. And drawings and specs are develop entirely differently. So drawings evolve. You continue to add information to the drawings to suit a particular project. Specifications are a deductive process where you're starting with a master, an office master, and you're removing things that don't fit. Presumably you're adding things that are required to suit the particular project. But a first pass through a spec, regardless what you're going to call it, it's going to be nearly complete. Even if you're submitting it at 50% DD or 50% CD, it doesn't matter. First pass is going to be nearly complete. The advantage of talking about the document as an iterative development is looking at a PPD, because like drawings, PPDs can be an additive process, much more so than specifications. And that's one of the reasons why I'm promoting PPD, especially as a replacement to outline spec.
Yes, because again, we get that development, the flow of information that is building on what's gone on before, rather than just starting over. Don Peterson asked, when you engage with the subcontractor prior to CDs, do you end up closing the documents to one manufacturer or keep it open? And that can work both ways. That's kind of dependent upon the contractor, Dawn, the GC that has selected that subcontractor, and sometimes it gets narrowed down to a closed proprietary spec, and other times they don't have a contractual relationship yet with the sub, and so they will want us to keep an open and more competitive specification. But I would say that it is very common to close it down. Edward George points out that value engineering is a bit of a misnomer. There's really not very much engineering that goes into it, the process.
Well, there's value engineering as everybody knows it today, and then there's true value engineering, which really is a big help. And the two are entirely different. So one thing I wanted to look at is, remember I was doing this presentation initially to contractors, and I was trying to explain to them how they may be able to help this process, and wanted to look at them saying that we typically as specifiers today are trying to get to some level of expertise from the contractors, and we're having to rely on this nebulous concept of show us your qualifications. Sometimes we're specifying years experience, and that really is not a great help. One of the things that I've been seeing more and more of, and I'm actually a proponent, is contractor certification. There are a number of certification programs out there. There are a number more coming online, and some of them are actually getting down to the individual craftsman as a certification. And I think that that's an excellent way to try to be able to specify quality labor and be able to help control the end result.
David, we might point out to the folks that we did a whole presentation on that very subject, 2-3 months ago, and that is available on YouTube, that you can watch if you go to the YouTube CSI area. You can find that discussion.
And the other thing that I would love dearly to have contractors get involved in is, let's talk about the product performance. Let's talk about your callbacks, your failures, not necessarily individual failures, but let's talk about the products that are being used and whether or not they're actually performing as expected. And gosh, if you've had successes out there, let's hear about them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that we can take advantage of everybody's experience and hopefully push this industry to a better future result. Because I try to build those kinds of feedback into our master specifications so that we have some basis for making future decisions. So if we understand that a particular product or a particular product type is not performing well, I certainly don't want to repeat the condition.
And that brings up a subject that we'll just mention in passing, that your office spec masters are a way of recording your corporate knowledge and experience. And even if, whether or not you subscribe to Master Spec or BDS, SBSD Spec Link, you need to tailor those things and record what works, what doesn't work. Put little notes in there about when to use one product versus the other, and warnings and whatever. You need to record your experiences, good and bad, in your spec masters.
Okay, and what I would encourage, again, our contractor construction team to get involved as early as possible. If you have to, make the specifier your best friend, because they will probably tell you when a project is underway, and they'll probably be reaching out to you for key data on product selection, system selections. Design team may not as much want to have you involved, but the technical team, the specifier, probably will. So,
and of course, it's one of the great things about CSI is that you get to meet some of these subcontractors and general contractors at your meetings and develop personal relationships with them, and you know who to call and say, well, I'm back and forth between this kind of roofing and that kind of roofing system. What do you think, Carl? And he'll say, give me the benefit of his installation experience over the years and help me make a good decision.
Right, because as the construction team, you see what's going on in the field, you understand what's working, you see what may be able to help in the specifications to be able to make things easier in the field or to be able to actually improve the overall performance. Those are the kinds of data that we're really looking for. So if you're going to talk to the technical side of the design team, come prepared to talk about all of this stuff in detail. Let us know what's going on so that we can make better selections, better informed selections and decisions. Okay. Again, realizing that this was designed for contractors, I want to point out that delegated design is one thing that is somewhat misunderstood, and that the contractors are actually assuming the risk, and they're assuming the liability for doing the final design. But it's incumbent on the design team to actually provide all the required design criteria. So if the contractor doesn't have enough information to actually complete the design, then it's important to be actually asking the design team to furnish that criteria sufficient to be able to complete. And the design team also has to try to develop these, I call them variables, that to define the final result of the delegated design enough that the contractor really does know what is expected.
We
had a lot of comments pop in there, didn't we?
Yeah. Joel Nemi says regarding value engineering, the state of Washington requires it for projects which receive any funding from the state. I've participated in several such reviews and believe that when the service is value analysis, good things can happen. It depends on the owner and design team's receptiveness. For example, one high school started as an addition and remodel old and became a build all new and demo the old for less cost. The architect's solution was to retain the just designed new classroom wing and add new common spaces and athletics instead of attempting to remodel the old mishmash.
Think outside the box, get a different opinion,
and think early and make early decisions.
Yep. Okay. The next point really is about design assist. Delegated design and design assist, we don't want to confuse those. All right, because design assist, the contractor or the subcontractor is brought on to help the architect actually develop detailing, to be able to get down into the nuts and bolts, and as a result of design assist, actually get to what will be the final submittal the contractor makes to the architect for approval. So what I wanted to make sure that contractors are understanding that the whole process is more than just developing details. It's really trying to coordinate. It's trying to make sure that the documents, specifications, and drawings are coordinated, and that we're taking care of more than just the detail of the system the contractor is providing. We're also wanting to take care of the perimeter, the transitions to other materials, the intersections the system may have with other materials, and making sure, especially exterior envelope, make sure that wall, exterior wall and roof are watertight and serviceable for the owner's use. Are you seeing this much more, Lewis, a design assist?
Yes, we get into that from time to time, especially, as I say, with curtain wall. That's one of the more common areas where we need to solve that. But we also did recently designed a high-rise building downtown here in Nashville that has some interesting ACM panels that are not just flat panels, but molded into different shapes. And we worked with the selected subcontractor to figure out practical solutions for how to actually build that.
And one of the things that we're seeing from our perspective is we actually are writing a design assist specification package where we're defining the process for design assist and the expected results along the way, with a timetable for how to get it done and what is expected at each point along the way to finishing. And I think that that's helpful for the architects and the contractors, because it gives them both a roadmap from start to finish, and it's a way of tracking the progress to make sure that they're going to be able to end up at the right place at the right time.
Tommy Smith asks, wants you, David, to answer, is that in delegated design, does the contractor become responsible for specified results?
In which design? Delegated design?
Delegated design. Does the contractor become responsible for specified results? Well, obviously, yes. I mean, the short answer to that is yes. But the question is, have we given clear enough performance requirements and design criteria so that we can ascertain that, in fact, compliance has occurred?
Right, because your only check is against what has been specified that the contractor is obligated to deliver.
Richard Dockman said that was a question I had as to what is the definition of design assist, because it's not addressed in AIA documents.
You're right, it's not, Richard, and thanks for that comment, because that's in part why I'm suggesting to our clients, the architects, if they're going to rely on design assist, that they really do need the process definition through a specification package, because if it's going to work well, it's usually instituted through a construction manager. The construction manager is going to select a subcontractor, and the owner should actually engage that subcontractor, so it's a paid service. And at that point, through the specification documents, you have, in effect, a contract document that you can use to enforce that engagement to get the kind of performance that you want. One example that I had, which was a project in Philadelphia, the architect proceeded with the project thinking that it was design assist. We had set up all the parameters. We had produced a specification by which we thought we were moving ahead. We had the subcontractor and the CM attending design assist meetings, and it was just shortly into the process where the cooperation from the subcontractor started to vanish. And it took us maybe another week or so to discover what had happened was that the owner failed to engage the contractor and actually offer to pay him for the service. So all of this became free service from the contractor. And at that point, why would he bother? So it is important to get that set up correctly so that you can be assured that you're going to have the cooperation. In this particular project, what it did is it threw everybody into a panic because they thought they were going to have the help. It turned out that they didn't. Now the architect had to regroup and go back and take a different approach to be able to actually finish the documents on time.
Okay.
So, some of the challenges and opportunities. Lewis, this one's all for you.
Oh no, you wrote this slide.
Okay. My perspective, again, as a specifier, I'm always looking to improve performance, and however we can do it, in a number of different ways that we have. One of the things we're faced with more and more today is modeling, mock-ups, testing. All of that is very valuable if it can be done early enough to really make an informed decision, help define what's going to happen during construction documents. If we could get the testing done in DD after the systems were decided and allow that to help inform CD detailing, that would be fabulous. But often it happens later.
You could also save a lot of money by doing your thermal modeling at that time and saving on the cost of HVAC equipment. Because if you've got your wall systems and everything detailed so that the mechanical contractor or engineer has a firm idea of what the heat loss and heat gain is going to be, they can make a more rational decision about designing, and oftentimes there are major savings to be made in the HVAC equipment, which then might also have some savings in the size of the steel beams or the number of steel beams for the roof construction to hold them up.
Right. And one of my favorite things, customization. I haven't met an architect yet that doesn't want to customize virtually every manufactured product. So if we can take the opportunity to get manufacturers involved, and hopefully, one of the things that I love to do is go out and visit manufacturing facilities, because it allows me to see what opportunities may exist for customization and what may not, and that helps to help inform the design team as well, to try to help guide them in an area that, hey, if I see them trying to customize something that really is not practical, I can try to put a stop to that early on. That becomes really helpful, I think, in helping to control the pricing of the contract and trying to meet that owner's budget.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We know that everybody is probably pretty busy these days. My firm certainly is, and we appreciate you taking some time out to not only listen to our presentation, but also to share your insights and questions and comments, and we appreciate that so much. David and I really feel very strongly about this being a discussion group, so that we too can learn things from our audience, and we want this to be your program. So if you have ideas for future discussion sessions, please keep those cards and letters coming in, friends and neighbors.
Yes, we always enjoy having you here with us, and we love getting your comments during the presentations. Thank you for being so attentive and interested enough to share your own experiences, comments, and questions.